尼罗河
P, please honor me or I'll flood slightly more or less than usual.
黄河
逼崽子，你真没见过黑社会哈！操你妈的！敢不敢跟我比划比划？操你妈！操你妈！我也敢不敢比划什么叫黑手？操你妈的你！
Hello, people of the internet. You may be wondering, Alexander, why do you look sad and cold and depressed? And why do your arms only go out this far before getting cut off? And why are you sitting down instead of standing up? The answer to all those questions is I'm back at school. So that means a change to scheduling for videos, in that there might not even be a schedule. I'm going to try and get one out like every 2 weeks, maybe a little more common than that if I can help it. But yeah, so I'm in a tiny, shitty apartment in the middle of an urban sprawl. So we're thriving.
张牙舞爪健身操，祝您健康，步步高，噜的。
You know, when it comes to Chinese history, everyone's always talking about the Three Kingdoms period, mostly because it was the only Chinese period in history that got a total war game, and just actually most like 99% of the video games made about China involves the Three Kingdoms period in some capacity. But there's a different period of Chinese history which I find far more interesting, and that is the Warring States period / Spring and Autumn, because I consider them one giant 500-year event of constant war and death. No one gives enough credit to the batshit insanity that is the Warring States period, and I'm here to put something of a band-aid on that. Because while, like the Three Kingdoms period, it is a process of China shattering and then slowly reconstituting itself, this time is much longer, much more deadly, way older, and much funnier. You like the art of war? You like Confucius? Are you a mohist? Because if you are, you're weird. And you should feel bad. But even those assholes are gonna enjoy the Warring States period, because that's where all that shit comes from. The Warring States is kind of like China's Bronze Age collapse. I made a video, shameless plug, I made a video about the Bronze Age collapse. And the reason I like the Bronze Age collapse is the same reason why I like the Warring States period, because it's all just, it's a big party. It's a big fun party of war. China's the Warring States period is also kind of like China's Axial Age, and that whole period is like the crucible in which the China we know that has existed since like 200 BC was formed. Prior to that, China looked real different, and I'm gonna run through the entire history that both led up to this point and the ramifications of the Warring States period afterwards. But first, buttons. I need you all to hit the buttons. You know the ones. You know, yeah. Hit the buttons. Do it. You know, I could just hold this video hostage until someone hits the buttons, and no one could do anything to stop me. Oh wait, my viewer retention. My name is Alexander. I do weird shit. Mostly history. It's looking to be mostly history and Wojak thumbnails, because those are the only things that get people to click on my videos. Right, so I think the first thing that in Chinese history that we can really say like definitely happened was the Shang dynasty, or as I like to call it, the Shang theocracy, because it wasn't really an imperial dynasty the way that like we think about Chinese dynasties throughout most of history. The Shang dynasty was more like a series of god emperors, and this trend kind of follows the possibly mythical Xia dynasty, where it's sort of like an Egyptian pharaoh situation. The king communes with like natural spirits and like the gods of the natural world, which the emperor then imparts what is supposedly the will of the gods to the people, and the empire does what he says.
I'm just gonna stump you. You're gonna keep coming back. I'm gonna seal up all my cracks. You're gonna keep coming back. Why? Because you keep smelling the syrup, you worthless bitch ass nigga. You're gonna stay on my dick until you die. You serve no purpose in life. Your purpose in life is to be in my stream sucking on my dick daily. Your purpose in life is to be in that chat blowing a dick daily. Your life is nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should kill yourself now.
This is actually a really interesting point where the Warring States period mirrors the Axial Age, in that the system of religion that China had prior to the Warring States period was a lot like Mesopotamian religion. I'm not drawing any connections between the two. That's just kind of like how animist religions slowly convert into like religions for civilized people. I could make a whole video on the topic of like gods of nature compared to gods of like human virtue, and like the dynamics between that, and it's a whole thing. The Shang emperors basically stood on a basis of power that worked based on their relation to the gods, like Egypt and Babylon. However, like Egypt and Babylon, a nomad tribe, specifically in this case the Zhou, went and conquered their asses and took over the empire. Though it wasn't really much of an empire, it was more just like the river basin around the Yellow River, and the Zhou, being horse people, fucked them up. And while the Zhou were in the process of conquering the Shang dynasty, there's this cute little thing that happened, right? So the Zhou took over the Shang. The Zhou took down the Shang dynasty around the same time as the Minoans disappeared, and the Minoans, who, if you don't know, are this like super ancient and like completely mysterious civilization from the island of Crete, who like died out like really way before the Bronze Age collapse. Like sometime it was either due to like climate change or the Achaeans / Mycenaeans, who are the people who attacked Troy during the Bronze Age collapse. But the Minoans, part of the Minoans dying was undoubtedly the fact that a massive volcanic eruption occurred on the Isle of Thera, also known as Santorini in the modern day. The island exploded, and like huge giant ash cloud / slight volcanic winter as the Shang were being deposed. And the story goes, at least, when the Zhou were about to like make their first like big victory against the Shang, the sky darkened with ash. They didn't know it was ash. They just thought the sun disappeared. And they were like, no way, look, clearly heaven disagrees with the Shang being in power. They're on our side. And this is how the Mandate of Heaven came to be, which is this really neat, like, ancient social contract. The Mandate of Heaven is this, like, really neat social contract that China has had for thousands of years, and then did away with it with communism because it was based on heaven. So the only system of checks and balances against the autocratic government are gone. After the Zhou took over the Shang dynasty, they reigned for about like 800 years, though those last few hundred years were really like, they reigned, you know? They reigned. they couldn't even go back to their old cap. They were chased out of their old capital and had to set up shop in a new one, because their power was so weak. And also, the whole Warring States period and Spring and Autumn period takes place during those last few hundred years of the Zhou dynasty. Now, for some numbers, some really fucking crazy numbers. The Spring and Autumn period was 294 years long. Across those 3 centuries, only 38 of those years were spent in peace. And over 1,200 different wars were fought. The 254-year period of the Warring States period, 468 wars were fought with only 89 years of peace. Where the hell else do you see numbers like that? That is 500 years. Over 500 years. Over 500 years. That... Jesus Christ. Over 500 years, over 1,600 wars, with a total of 130 years of peace. That's absurd. Granted, China has these sorts of numbers all the time. Just look at the Taiping Rebellion, or, literally any meme about Chinese history, because it's just, small town is put under siege, 5 million die. Something else cool about China during the Warring States period is something that it has in common with the Bronze Age collapse, and that is the chariot problem. Now, the chariot problem I mentioned back in my Bronze Age video, and in that, chariots were really expensive to make, and you had to raise a lot of horses, and you had to raise a lot of very skilled fighters to man said chariot. And as you get the invention of iron weapons, and more easily produced weapons, such as javelins, spears, and swords, infantry tactics become like way more viable. However, unlike the Middle East, the Chinese chariot problem, which is very similar, doesn't arise from revolutions in weapon making or metallurgy. It's not a grassroots type of thing, but rather it arises from the need for more efficient government. The whole of the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period was just one giant Darwinistic competition to see who could make the largest army, the cheapest army, and what kind of government could run that large, cheap army the most efficiently. This led to the invention of things like conscription, standardized units, merit-based promotion, land taxes, a census, meritocratic bureaucracy, and plenty of other shit. In order to participate in this competition and come up with all these ideas that work and are viable for the Warring States period, you need someone to help you out in teaching you how to rule. Up until this point, there had really only been one settled monarch in the whole Chinese plain. Everyone else was in either semi-nomadic, nomadic, or settled but still Stone Age tribes. So the only governments that anyone had ever experienced were the Shang theocracy, or were tribal governments, the Shang theocracy, and the Zhou feudal system, which also is a weird thing, where the Zhou had feudalism similar to Western European style in 1000 BC, which is kind of crazy to me. But in order to participate in this conflict, you need someone to help you out how to rule, because no one had really, given it a shot before. So what you get is this class of wandering mercenary philosophers.
Ming Dynasty pussy got me acting unwise.
Which is the coolest combination of words I've heard in a while. And China becomes this Wild West of government structure, where everyone's trying out these weird, crazy things to see if it'll be more efficient than whatever their neighbor's doing, so they can, crush it. And the likes of these mercenary philosophers include Confucius, Mozi and his Mohis, and Sun Tzu. Confucius, I'm sure, is the most well, Confucius and Sun Tzu have like equal notoriety, but Confucius was one of these mercenary philosophers, and his system worked on a basis of relationships within the society to create, and balancing all those to create societal harmony. So everyone was sort of like satisfied with their position in the society, because if they were lower, the higher ups had a responsibility to not, abuse them, and the higher ups were satisfied because all the people below them then had a religious responsibility to their overlords. And in order to be a good member of society, you had to, fulfill those obligations. And this sort of theme of harmony is sort of an extension of like rice farming culture, because for those of you who don't know, rice farming is like way more, it takes like way more work and is way more difficult than like barley and wheat farming that you might have done in Europe, especially corn farming. But rice farming, you have to have a lot of people who all work together, and if you don't work together and you aren't, and your community is disharmonious, you die, you starve. Now, Sun Tzu, we all know Sun Tzu, all right? Yeah, I'll admit his book is not like super profound. If you want to read about battle strategy, I highly recommend Gustavus Adolphus's work, maybe Frederick the Great a little bit. A lot of like northern Eastern European generals from like the 30 Years War era and the periods after that have a lot more to say, but Sun Tzu is still really good, even though a lot of his stuff is very basic. Like, you'll see some of his stuff is like, know your enemy and know yourself. It's like, yeah, no shit, if I don't know who I'm fighting, I can't do anything. But Sun Tzu was one of the first people in history to really, give thought to battle strategy, like seriously, and then impart that knowledge to like other government officials and other generals, and turn it into like a school of thought. Mozi is weird. The Mohists are weird. The Mohists were super interesting, though, in that their whole thing was that, okay, we're gonna travel around, because he was another mercenary philosopher, right? And Mozi's thing was he would travel around, he would teach people how to govern, but he would only teach the underdogs, right? He would go to like an underdog state, who didn't really know what it was doing, teach them how to govern, and then they would get really good at governing and build up a nice army, and then go attack another state who didn't know how to govern. So the Mohis would switch sides and start teaching the other unprepared state how to govern. Why? I don't know. You could probably find it on Wikipedia. It's an interesting story nonetheless. These guys are just like the tip of the iceberg, all right? There's a reason why the whole like event, I guess, of all these mercenary philosophers going around teaching people how to govern is called the 100 Schools of Thought. Because there were a shit ton. Turns out that the one that succeeded, at least in terms of creating an army and an efficient government, was the Qin legalism, which and the Qing dynasty eventually ended up uniting China. That said, Qin legalism eventually fucked over the Qin, because for those of you who don't know, legalism's main tenet for their philosophy is fuck you, obey the law, and the only way to really enforce that is to kill people for disobeying even like the smallest laws, right? And in war, this makes a lot of sense. When you're like 1 against 7 other states, yeah, sure. But after you win, and then you need to I don't know, suppress your barbarian neighbors or something. The funny thing about having the punishment for being late be death, and the punishment for instigating a rebellion also being death, is that once you're late for something, such as rallying to an army muster point, you don't have anything to lose. Like, you could rebel and the consequences would be the same. So that's what Liu Ban did, and the Qing dynasty died after 20 years in power, and then the Han dynasty took its place and decided to operate with still had a legalist style of government, but like introduced a lot of Confucianism into it to make it more palatable to your average person. So from that, because the Han dynasty is like the definitive first Chinese dynasty, like that, yeah, technically the Qing dynasty was the first empire. The Han dynasty is, well, A, was way more successful, and B, all the people in China, well, not all of them, but like the majority ethnic group call themselves Han Chinese after this dynasty. So the legacy of China as a united empire is sort of a constant struggle between legalism and feudalism. I really like Kraut's video on it. I don't know why I'm recommending him, because I am nowhere near as popular as Kraut, and I guarantee you that if you're watching this video, you've probably seen one of his videos at least once. My last thing is the fuck the Qing dynasty for burning like all the literature about the 100 schools of thought, because now we only have like 5 of them, which I'm really pissed about. Anyway, that was sad me from having to start classes again, going over why I like the Warring States period so much. I hope you enjoyed. I hope my voice wasn't too monotone. And yeah, do the algorithm stuff. Hit the buttons. Subscribe. Not enough of you are. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm done now. Bye.